Welcome to The Kitchen Table, a show dedicated to helping you escape diet culture, gain trust with food, honor your body, and live a brighter life. Hello, and welcome back to The Kitchen Table. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Alicia Brown, a non-diet registered dietitian and nutritionist. And today I am so excited I have Cherie on the show. She's been on the show once before, and I was so excited to have her back. She's a licensed professional counselor in Texas. She's the founder and owner of Food Freedom Therapy, a group practice specializing in helping men and women make peace with food and their bodies. Yes. Before starting Food Freedom Therapy, Cherie has 15 years of experience as an eating disorder mentor, speaker, educator, and advocate. She's also a member of the International Association of Eating Disorders Professionals Foundation, the IAEDP. That is a marvelous organization. They also have a bunch of great resources. Go check it out. And the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health. I invited Cherie on the show today to talk about weight, what we need to know about weight before we start on our journey in intuitive eating, and maybe what we need to understand about ourselves and our weight, as we feel like so often it so defines us. We so often correlate weight and health as two synonymous things. We associate thinness with health in our culture so much that can lead to a lot of disordered relationships with food. And so there's a lot to navigate here in the conversation about weight and how we feel about our bodies. And I wanted Cherie to come on the show to kind of help us understand what this conversation about weight is all about on a deeper level. So Cherie, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be back. So I'm excited about this conversation because I think it's a really important one.
Absolutely. So I think like a lot of people are really apprehensive to starting intuitive eating because they know that with intuitive eating, it's not like a weight loss approach. Intuitive eating is truly an anti-diet, anti-intentional weight loss approach to health. Can you explain, like just at the top of the episode here, why weight loss methods don't jive with intuitive eating, why the two can't mix, why an intuitive eating program can't also be a weight loss program?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is important for us to talk about because I see that happening more and more where people who are still promoting weight loss are kind of co-opting the intuitive eating. And so I think there's some confusion. And so clarity is always good. So the reason the two don't mix is because intuitive eating is a different approach to our relationship with food, where we are moving away from the external rules of being told what's good for us, what's bad for us, what we should be eating, when we should be eating it. And we're tuning into our bodies and listening to our bodies and trusting that our bodies will tell us what they need and when they need it. And so if we are worried about trying to lose weight, then we're going to have external rules. And those external rules are going to always interfere with and come into conflict at times with those internal cues that we're getting, right? Right. So if we're feeling hungry, we might be thinking things like, well, I shouldn't be eating because I just ate, so many hours ago. Or if, we're counting calories, then we're worried about how many calories we've eaten at that point. And you see, it just takes such a focus away from our bodies and that intuitive aspect, right? And that's kind of in the name, it's all intuitive, and puts it back on the focus of rules and guidelines designed to help us manipulate our bodies. Now, that's not to say that weight loss might not happen with intuitive eating. It might, but we might also stay the same, or we might gain weight. I've seen all of those things happen with intuitive eating. But that's different than going into it trying to approach it from a diet type standpoint.
Mm-hmm. So oftentimes it's like these external rules that we face from diet culture, like the eat this, not that, this food's better than that food. When we're trying to intentionally lose weight, those rules are like at the forefront of our mind with the hope that if we just choose the right thing, if we just like weigh out these two foods and choose the better one, that we'll have this result of weight loss. However, that's not really working. That hierarchy of foods and choosing the quote unquote better thing compared to the other thing the intentional weight loss program, the reason why we're even intuitive eating dietitians is because 95% of people who have tried that method don't find it to be sustainable, especially over like a 5-year period. This is where a lot of people find that there's a lot of failure and defeat in trying to be quote unquote healthy by trying to lose that weight. And so this is where intuitive eating comes with this completely different approach about saying, like, okay, what if there wasn't that hierarchy? What if there wasn't like that good and bad food mentality? And what if we were actually able to tap into the body and its sensations to discover what, when, and how much to eat? Do you think like that's kind of like the connection is between like getting out of the head and all of like the diety culture kind of mantras and getting into the body with intuitive eating? Does that feel true in your practice?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. It's just such a different take. The word trust comes to mind. I think it's about trusting ourselves or trusting our body, even trusting food, to nourish us and to give us the energy that we need to live our best lives. And whereas I feel like the diet culture approach, it definitely fosters a mistrust of a lot of food and a mistrust of our bodies. We're told all the time that we can't trust ourselves around food. We can't even
Mhm.
trust our hunger signals. There's why there's all this total garbage about like how to suppress our hunger signals as if there's something bad about them or there's something that we should make go away, instead of seeing them as a very basic survival mechanism that, thank goodness, our bodies tell us like, hey, I'm needing some energy. And in seeing that as a positive thing, we're told it's something we should make go away as much as
Mhm.
possible. And so it comes from a totally different place as far as how to relate to our bodies and to food. And like I said, for me, I think about the word trust, and I think that really captures intuitive eating in a nutshell.
I so agree. And something that prevents people from going into intuitive eating as well is this thought of like, I can't trust that my body won't gain weight with intuitive eating. What would you say to somebody that like has that question, especially somebody who knows like with intuitive eating, there is no hierarchy, which means any and all foods are on the table. That brings up a ton of fear about food, but also probably underneath that, and mostly about our bodies and how our bodies might change. And so, what might you say to somebody who feels like super fearful about weight gain embarking on their intuitive eating journey?
Yeah. Well, first, I always validate that is completely understandable. That makes so much sense given the culture that we live in, where thin bodies are prized and idolized, and people in larger bodies are marginalized. So, this fear is, it has some foundation there. It's not an irrational fear at
Yeah,
all. I
yeah.
totally understand where clients are coming from, both
Mm,
because I have been there personally, as well as like just seeing what goes on in the world around us and how media portrays bodies. All that makes perfect sense.
yeah.
So I always start there and just validating that. And but then I also, it's good to explore, like, why does that matter, because it's different for every person. Like, what is the meaning of gaining weight? What is it that you think gaining weight will mean for your life? How will it make
Mm,
your life different, worse? Or if you're losing weight, what do you think that's going to offer you that you don't currently have? Or what do you think it will offer you that you don't think is available to you in your current body? Um,
yeah.
and just especially I always like to point out, like, I have thin privilege. I live in a straight size body, and so I always recognize that and say that I understand that it's easier for me to have this conversation than it is for clients who are currently in a larger body or might recover into a larger body, that they face more challenges and barriers in that, because there's more criticism and there's more weight bias and discrimination that they're going to encounter. So, I think all of those things are really essential topics for us to really unpack and explore, because there's some heavy, significant things that are, they hold a lot of weight for people. Now, pardon the pun, but but you know what I mean? Like, these
Yes.
are these are significant issues, because we start touching on fears about worthiness, or whether or not I'm going to be able to find or keep my partner. Those things are really immense. issues in our lives. So it seems like it's about the weight, and it is, but it's really a lot more complex than that.
It seems like, in a way, based off what you're saying, and I completely agree with this, that the weight resembles something else deeper. Acknowledging that, like, yes, in our society, larger bodies face more of this adversity, face maybe more struggle because thinner bodies are deemed as more attractive, right? Or more clothes are made to fit people in larger bodies. This is the privilege that you've identified as thin privilege in the conversation today. And for other people, I identify as having thin privilege as well. People in larger bodies, maybe they find clothes and clothes shopping and having that experience seem like there's more barriers. Going on an airplane ride, riding in a canoe, there are things that don't accommodate their bodies, and that affects their experience. And that's something that's so important that we talk about. A lot of these issues about fat phobias, which really what we're talking about, the fear of fat, are embedded so deeply within our society. But greater, if we even like got above the trees in that conversation as well, it's because we've made the weight something different than objective. There is some like meaning attached to weight gain and weight loss in our society today. I idolize thinness. There's some deeper meaning underneath losing weight, and then there's some deeper meaning underneath gaining weight. The themes that are coming out are like themes of unhealthiness with weight gain, themes of like falling off the bandwagon, not taking care of ourselves. And then with lower weight, it seems like there are meanings of like, oh, we're being healthy, we are taking care of ourselves. It's just like that 180. But really, is that all true, Cherie? Like, is the meaning we've attached to weight actually true? Because like you're nodding your head like you're in agreement with what I'm saying. And it's so weird that you're in agreement when you're in Texas and I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and these themes are the same. And these
Yeah.
themes haven't stood the test of time, right? If we were back in the 1920s, these themes might have been a little bit different and have evolved over time to be what they are today. Can you unpack this a little bit more? Because this is juicy. This thought of what we've attached to weight and weight change.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think even this is a complex discussion because there's the whole issue of, how, like you were alluding to, like how standards have changed over time. I mean, what we consider attractive and beautiful and valuable now is not the same as it was in the history. It's not the
Yeah,
same as it was or is in other cultures.
totally.
And there's a lot being discussed now about how so much of this is rooted in racism and anti-blackness and so there's some intersectionality there with that, but when it comes to health, I mean, this whole health at every size movement is just an incredible movement that's brought
Yes.
to light how indoctrinated we all have been with this message that fat equals being unhealthy. And it's, again, I mean, we see this all the time, and you probably see this on your social media. It's like, if you even question that, people act like you're a complete idiot. Like everybody knows, and what's wrong with you? All the research is so
Mm,
clear that quote
mm.
unquote obesity is killing us. And it's like, that's what's so sad to me is how the research doesn't actually show that, but that's what's being touted. And it's so mainstream now that nobody even questions it.
Mhm.
And there's lots of room to question it, when you really start to take a look at it and recognize on a deeper level that a lot of the research is either it's bias or some incorrect conclusions have been drawn, right? So there's a lot of assuming causation when there's correlation, right? And what that means is there might be studies that associate certain illnesses with being in a larger body or at a higher BMI, but that doesn't mean that one causes the other, right? So there are a lot of factors that aren't accounted for in this research, anything from other metabolic conditions that are underlying that aren't accounted for, other lifestyle factors. Weight stigma is a huge one that's not accounted for. And we know that all kinds of trauma, bullying, and that includes weight stigma, affects people's health in a very dramatic way. And most studies don't account for that. Right. So there's just so much that's not a part of the discussion. And we just take things at face value and say, oh, look, there's a correlation. That must mean that being fat causes those things. And it's not true. That's not what the research and the statistics actually showed. Those are some incorrect conclusions. And then on top of that, there's a lot of research that doesn't get talked about how actually people in the quote unquote overweight categories actually live longer than people who are in the quote unquote normal categories, and how there
For
was
BMI.
there was like a meta study that showed that across all causes of death, people in the quote unquote overweight category had lower rates of death for all causes of death. Right. And then we also see that for many diseases and chronic conditions, that being at a higher BMI is what they call a protective factor, meaning you're less likely to get something, or you're less likely to die from it if you do get it, like certain kinds of cancer, certain heart conditions. But again, we don't hear about this, right? This kind of research isn't talked about. It's like there's no room in the medical community or the media to offer an alternative viewpoint or to question this predominant paradigm. And it's really frustrating for a culture that prides itself on, being very scientific and all of that. It's kind of ironic in a really sad, frustrating way that we aren't being very thorough when it comes to the science and weight.
Some practitioners like you are, like Christy Harrison are. Like when I think of, real dietitians and other professionals in the space, counselors, other therapists like yourself and others, some are pulling apart the research just to reaffirm that size isn't as correlative as it might seem, which goes back to the conversation of like, we have to think of a way to remove the weight from being a part of the conversation about health so that we can understand how to build trust with our bodies more.
Mm-hmm.
And so really for everybody listening, really get down to the nitty gritties of like what weight loss means for you in your life. What will weight loss bring for you in your life? And does it require losing weight to get what you're wanting from weight loss? Oh, I hear all the time, and Cherie, maybe you hear this too, of like, I want to lose weight to gain confidence. Confidence is like a huge thing. We all want confidence. I want confidence. Everyone wants confidence. Do you have to lose weight to be confident? That's just being very serious. If we're feeling that way, why? Okay, let's talk about weight gain. What if we gained weight? What are the fears there that are coming up? They're all completely valid, like we were talking about. We're having this conversation today, really bringing to the surface why those fears are valid. In the same way, the praise is valid in some way by our culture. It's validated in a way by our culture. In the same way, weight loss is demonized in our culture. But also, what is the truth underneath that, right, Cherie? Like the truth of the weight gain. Is it actually harmful to our health? Is it actually, or at some point actually harmful for mental or physical or emotional well-being? That's really the question that a lot of people have about weight before even starting intuitive eating is, how could we let this weight loss ambition go and be okay? If weight gain were to happen, will everything still be okay? We're needing some reassurance that weight gain through intuitive eating could be okay, or weight loss or weight change or whatever it is. Where does any of that land with you at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything that you're saying. And I think those are the really tough questions that we have to wrestle with ourselves and with our clients, because they're all super valid. I mean, I think there is that aspect of health, kind of like we've talked about, because we hear this all the time. And when we go to the doctor, especially if we are in a larger body, you're going to hear talk about needing to lose weight from so many doctors who are going to assume a lot of things about you based on your body size. right? But I was just talking with a client this morning who was talking about health. And when we really unpacked it, what she realized on her own, kind of stumbled into, was, I am not as worried about health as I was thinking I was. This really is about weight and just how I look and not wanting to gain weight and what other people will think and how I'm going to feel and all of that. And it's really not as much about health as I was saying it was. So I do think there's also an element of that. Sometimes that now it's more acceptable to talk about health when we talk about why we want to lose weight. And I think even diet companies are picking up on that. So that's why you see all these diet companies talking about, doing it for your health, and it's a quote unquote lifestyle, and
Yes.
all of that really terrible stuff that they're trying to deceive people with. But and it's not to say that for some people the health aspect isn't important, especially I think for people who have some chronic illnesses that they maybe are trying to address with dietary changes, or have been told if they lose weight, because that's often what people get told with various conditions. Well, just lose weight or cut out carbs and then you'll be able to heal this or put this in remission. So I do think that can be an element. But I mean, we all, well, maybe not we all, but there are, I should say, and if you don't know any, I encourage you to find these people on social media. There are people in larger bodies who are happy and confident
And healthy.
and healthy. And there are plenty of people who are in thin privileged bodies who are not confident, who are not happy. So that right there is just proof that losing weight or achieving a certain goal, size wise or appearance wise, is not a guarantee that we're going to be happy or feel confident. I know when I was in my eating disorder, sure, there were times I felt really good about oh, wow, look at, I can fit in this outfit, or somebody was maybe praising my appearance or my weight loss, and that felt good temporarily. But in general, I was not happy. I was not happy with my appearance. I was still crying in the morning, looking in the mirror, changing my clothes a million billion times because I was so unhappy with my body. And here I am, X pounds heavier, much heavier than I thought I would ever be okay with. And I'm happier. I don't necessarily love my body, I'm not, it's not that kind of relationship, but I found a place of acceptance. I am confident because my identity is not attached to my body and my weight anymore. I really think that's the key. I don't think a cure for body image problems is changing our bodies. I think that just rarely, if ever, works. I think it's really figuring out what it means to be confident and healthy and happy and have a sense of worth and purpose outside of our bodies.
That's the kind of woman I want to be around. That's who I want my friend group to be like. Do you know what I mean? That's who I want to surround myself with, is that sort of confidence that just exudes, that wraps you in, that is that energy that makes you want to be around them. I think that when we think about the people, kind of going off that tree, because I just agree with everything. And I so appreciate you sharing your own story of recovery. And the same is true for my story too. I thought I could never accept my body and my recovered body. Oh, I thought I could never accept it. It was so painful to gain weight. But gosh, now, the happiness and the confidence and everything that I thought that I wanted seems much more attainable just being me. And just being me and just being healthy has to require nourishing myself in a way that aligns with my needs in order to be me. Or else I'm trying to be somebody else by trying to lose this weight. And that gets to be a really hard and painful experience, and it doesn't grant us the happiness that we're looking for. Oh gosh, but where was I going with that? It's yeah, when we really think about it, when we think about the highest version of ourselves, the best version of ourselves, the self that we're trying to be or aspiring to be, when we think about her and think about her qualities, does it really require weight loss to be her? Does it really require changing our weight, changing ourselves to be her? And if so, are we just pretending? Or what are we trying to be or become? That's like the greater question in all of this. And that's how maybe I relate it back to intuitive eating is like, gosh, if we are able to put that desire for weight loss that we all have. And for some of us, it's a very potent desire because we have just been told our bodies are wrong. I get that. We've been told they're just not the right size. I get that. I've lived that feeling that just my body is not right. But what if we could put that ambition on the back burner and just say, okay, I understand you. I understand that part of myself that wants to lose weight. I'm going to put that on the shelf for a moment and just focus on meeting my body's needs and just seeing what that feels like with this like explorative sense, right? Getting more curious and relieving that judgment through trying to just discover what health means to us when we put weight loss on the back burner. It's a really key conversation with intuitive eating. Would you agree with that, Cherie?
No, yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think too, expanding our definition of health is not just physical, but our mental health. And I don't think that's something that we talk about enough, that we focus so much on the physical aspect and somehow the mental health aspect is not as important. And it absolutely is. I mean, we're not just physical beings. We are emotional and mental and spiritual beings. And all of those aspects of ourselves are very important. And I wish we honored that more in our culture. And I think we're moving in that direction, where I think there's a little bit more awareness and support for people who go to therapy and things like that. I don't think it has the stigma that it once had, but I still think we have a long ways to go as far as honoring mental health in the same way that we elevate physical health. And so a lot of times it's almost like we put those in competition with each other. I don't think they naturally are, but I think we kind of do that in a way that's like, oh, well, I've got to do this for my physical health, even though it takes such a toll on my mental health. And it's kind of like, well, at whatever cost is the way that I'm going to approach losing weight, because it's like, I have to lose weight. So whatever cost that comes at, then so be it.
That must be worth it.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is the weight loss paradigm. Just push through, just do it anyway. You talked about trust earlier in the episode, but would you think that actually cultivates a sense of distrust with the body when you're constantly rejecting it in a way, rejecting how it's feeling? Just do one more workout session, one more salad, whatever it is to try to achieve this goal. Do you think that it breeds more disconnection, distrust than connection and trust?
Oh, absolutely. And that's really unfortunate because our bodies are our homes, really. Like, it's how we experience this world and it's how we go through this world. It allows us to do the things that we love in life or have relationships with people. Really, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
it's our home and it's the only one we've got. And the fact that we dishonor it so often, or we mistrust it, or we abuse it, or we just send it so much hate, for not looking right, or maybe if we're struggling with a chronic condition. I definitely have clients who have chronic illnesses that are yeah, and through no fault of their own, and
Totally,
are
me
having to
too.
process and come to terms with what does it mean to
Yeah.
have a body that doesn't do the things that maybe
Oh,
other quote unquote normal people get to do or have in their bodies. And that's hard.
it is
It's
hard.
kind of like a relationship with another person. There's good times, there's bad times, there can be times of distrust or feeling betrayed. It's definitely an up and down thing, for sure. But I saw you saying like, oh, I can relate to that. I would love to hear a little bit if you're
Oh,
willing to share.
oh, sure, Cherie. Yeah, my colon and I have this relationship, with this ulcerative colitis.
Mm,
Oh, you know what? Accepting my body has helped me manage my chronic condition so much better. Oh my gosh, I've been able to, instead of just hating my body for my chronic conditions, like with ulcerative colitis, it is the least cute. I mean, not me. There's a lot of uncute chronic diseases. I don't know a cute one, but having to run to the bathroom every time I'm stressed, having urgent bowel movements, it's just hard to live with this. Let me tell you, what you're saying is so true of finding acceptance in the body. letting go of the weight change stuff has helped me accept other things in my body when it does not perform right. Because my colon, it doesn't know how to perform right. It gets a little skitsy. It gets a little bit like spastic. It gets a little angry with me. I get that. Okay. I got to work with my colon rather than against my colon. I've got to nurture my colon. I got to treat it well. I got to talk to it and say nice things and be nice, because if I don't, that distrust with my colon will only lead to more anger and resentment for myself. And that casts a ripple effect into other areas of my life. That stress carries forward into other things, and that leads to greater body distrust in different ways. And so, on the flip side, exactly what you're saying of like, wow, finding some body acceptance in its state that it is right now has in a great way helped me manage my chronic conditions. I have celiac disease and I've got ulcerative colitis, and I live with these things, and it's okay because I can still trust my body. And my weight's going to change weirdly at times because sometimes I do a poor job at managing these conditions. Sometimes they run rampant. Sometimes I don't know how to control them, and I still have to find compassion and trust with my body in order to get myself to a grounded state. Thank you for asking me to extrapolate on that. That's a huge conversation, probably separate conversation from what we're talking about
It
just
is. I
about
was just thinking,
weight.
if you haven't done a podcast on that, you
I
probably
never
should.
have. I never
It's
have.
really,
Yeah.
I think it's super relevant. I mean, I don't know what your experience is, but I have a lot of clients who have chronic illnesses. And I think that's because there's a big overlap with disordered eating and chronic illnesses. And, some of that I believe just goes back to diet culture and wellness culture now, where people are being encouraged into disordered eating to quote unquote cure. I know I keep saying quote unquote, but I just want, since nobody can see me, if they're listening to the podcast, I just want to make sure like it's clear that some of these claims and things I don't agree with, or, they are not as cut and dry as they're made out to be.
Exactly.
But, I see a lot of PCOS, I see celiac disease, diabetes,
Yes.
there are several others, but those are some really common ones. So I think this is a very relevant topic. And unfortunately, as people are trying to figure out how to manage these things and best take care of themselves, they're trying to wade through all the information where people are telling them you need to cut out this food and do this diet and eliminate these things and
Lose this weight.
lose this weight. And it becomes very confusing and very frustrating for
Totally.
people to get all these messages, especially when it ends up harming their relationship with food,
Yes.
or they've already had issues with food in the past and they're afraid of like, this is going to trigger old eating disorder stuff, or it ends up not working. And then they feel like a failure, like I must not have done it right. Some of that same old diet type stuff where it's not sustainable. So then people can't stay on it. And then they feel like they're the problem, or they just lack willpower or whatever. And so there's a lot of problems with that in these chronic illness spaces. And so I think that would be a very relevant topic for you to have a podcast on. So thank you for sharing a little bit, because I know people are going to resonate with that.
Thank you for opening that door. And even for people with chronic illnesses, would you recommend to them as well, even though they might be hearing things like cure this diet with this food, cure this with that food, quote unquote. I love that. You have to like add that disclaimer because it's just a claim that's not rooted in anything. That's celiac disease different. Ulcerative colitis, there's no healing diet for this yet. There's a lot of philosophy, but treatment wise, would you say that healing our relationship with food, if that's at the forefront, it can actually help manage the mental side of health as well as the physical side of health too, while managing these conditions?
Oh, absolutely. Because when we have a very fearful, anxious relationship with food, that takes a toll on our bodies, right? Kind of like you were saying, you can see when you're stressed how that affects your colon, right? So we
Boom.
can't really separate our mental health and our emotions from our bodies and what goes on in our bodies. And so if we are experiencing a lot of stress, fear, anxiety, guilt, all these really powerful emotions around food, it's going to affect how our body feels when we eat. It's going to affect how we process foods, right? Like
Yes.
that definitely plays a role in digestion. I know when I'm stressed, I'm more likely to get an upset stomach than if if I'm not, regardless of what I've eaten or not eaten. And I've definitely worked with clients who are quite certain and tell me in no uncertain terms when they start counseling that they are allergic or are sensitive to certain foods because they get GI issues whenever they eat it. And that's not to say that doesn't happen sometimes and it's not valid, but sometimes it turns out it's just the stress and anxiety
Sure.
from their eating disorder that was causing those reactions. And by the
Right.
time they get through recovery, they're eating gluten again or they're eating cheese again. So there's definitely a big relationship between like how we feel about food and emotionally how we're experiencing our food versus like how we process them and how we experience them on a physical level.
It's truly, when we say like a relationship with food, it's like a relationship with all these individual foods, a relationship with bread, our relationship with the foods that cause us discomfort, our relationship with all sorts of foods that brings us back to our relationship with our bodies too. And even a relationship with our chronic conditions, how we think and
Mhm.
feel about these chronic conditions that we might have for those listening, like there's a relationship with our bodies with that aspect of it too. When we bring consciousness and awareness to all of these relationships and remove the weight loss drive behind all of them, we can see these relationships for what they are and begin
Mhm.
to heal them through accessing our intuition. Does that feel true, Cherie?
It does. It does. And, I want to say for anybody that is in this place where they're trying to do that and it's really hard, like
Yeah.
I see that, I get that. And also I think in a culture where that's not always supported or understood by others, sometimes this can feel a little bit like a lonely road,
Yeah.
where people aren't going to understand you giving up dieting or aren't going to necessarily see weight gain as a positive thing. That can be disheartening and it can feel kind of lonely. And so I just want to say, like, I'm cheering you on. There are so many of us in this space that are cheering you on, and surround yourself as much as possible by people who are going to be your cheerleaders in that, and find communities online and do as much unfollowing people even if it's in real life. I know it's not as easy as hitting a mute button or an unfollow button in real life, but being really careful about who we let influence us and speak into our lives as much as we can, because this is a hard enough journey anyway, without being around people or filling our feed with accounts that make it even harder by giving us a lot of toxic messages about food or weight and that kind of thing. Um, it's a process to unlearn a lot of this and start thinking about weight and bodies and health and all of that in such a different way.
Hmm.
It really takes time. And so that's the other encouragement I want to offer. Because sometimes I have clients that will come in and be like, well, we've been talking about this for a couple weeks or a couple months, and I'm still struggling with this. I'm like, of course you are. Like, we're talking about a whole lifetime of this is how you've been taught to think about things. This is how you have been relating to food in your body. We have to be patient in the process, which is tough because I think, that's tough anyway.
Yeah.
In our society, we're kind of a microwave society, instant gratification. But, also I think the most of us that have struggled with eating disorders, we kind of have that like perfectionist temperament, and we want everything to kind of just go smoothly and perfectly. And it's like, I made a decision that I'm going to recover, or that this is the way it's going to be. So it should be a pretty linear line from here to there, and smooth sailing. And that's not how it usually is. It can be a little messy and it can take a while.
And let the messiness and let the time be okay. Give yourself that grace to allow yourself those two things. Cherie, as we mentioned, this is like the last question that I have for you today. As I mentioned, like in both of our work with intuitive eating, oftentimes it is the weight, the potential for weight gain that prevents somebody from pursuing this effort of healing their relationships with food in their bodies. It's really hard for them to put that ambition for weight loss on the back burner for a period of time to do the introspection, the work necessary to be successful with intuitive eating. What would you say to that person right now? Do you have some encouragement or a tip or anything to offer them? Anybody who's like wanting to still pursue weight loss, but also wanting to heal their relationship with food, what would you say to them?
Well, some of the things that we've already said, as far as like exploring, the reality of how possible that even is, because the research is pretty clear. And I think most of our lived experience will show us that it's really hard to lose weight and sustain that, unless we are in an eating disorder, you know? I mean, and so there's a certain amount of just coming to terms with the reality of, is what I'm wanting even possible? And is it possible long term? And that's tough. That can be a really hard truth to
It's a
accept.
great place to start, though.
Yeah. And then I think also exploring, what does this cost you? This being in the disordered eating or being on the
Mm,
dieting roller coaster, what toll has that taken on your life? What sacrifices have you
mm.
had to make? How is it taken away from your life instead of adding to it? And I like to help clients like really explore, what might life be like with food freedom and body freedom, right? Not that it's going to be perfect, but what might have time for that you don't have time for now, or what might be some fun activities that you get to engage in, whether it's going out with friends to a restaurant and not having to try to figure out what you're going to eat ahead of time by looking at the menu, and you could just go a spur of the moment wherever people want to go, or joining your family on a beach vacation and not feeling like you have to hide, all covered up on the beach, that just
Yes.
kind of exploring like, what are the possibilities? Because I feel like this is such a hard thing
Yeah.
to move into, of
Yeah.
body acceptance, especially if there is body changes. We have to have a vision of, why are we doing that work? What are we working towards? And have a sense of, as hard as this is, it will be worth it.
As hard as it is to heal my relationship with food and body, as hard as it is to know that my body might change, on the other side of that, that ease, that empowerment, that confidence, that clarity that's on the other side of that, that might bring us more joy and happiness in our life. I think we have to constantly remind us of that why, so that we can
Mhm.
continue on our efforts to not feel as at war with food in our bodies anymore. I think we're all wanting that confidence tree, that clarity, that joy, that happiness. I think once we put weight loss on the back burner, we never pull it back again. We never dive into it again. It's like we are in intuitive eating because we connect with our own intuitive eater. That's where we want to be.
Yeah, I think there are times where we might feel tempted,
Yes.
where it's like, oh, it's almost that reaction because maybe it's a comment somebody makes, or maybe because life gets really stressful and it's almost
Yes.
this like, oh, but I can go back to dieting. That felt structured. That felt good. Or I can lose
Right.
weight. That felt good.
Right.
But I think once we really tasted food and body freedom, we can't give that up. It's we remember too clearly how miserable it was. And sometimes and a client said this the other day, it's like sometimes we don't realize how miserable we were in that space where we
Yeah.
were wrapped up in dieting and disordered eating and weight loss, until we're not in it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, until we taste freedom, we don't realize how awful and how much bondage we were in to that, and how much, like Christy Harrison, you mentioned earlier, says, how
Yes.
much it really was our life thief.
Totally. We've come up for air. And so if you try
Yeah,
to go underwater again, it's like, oh gosh, where's the surface? That's kind of how I feel with intuitive eating too. Oh, I could track calories, but whoa, I can't breathe. I can't
right.
breathe down there. I need to get up for air. So, wow. Thank you so much for all of your sharing. I'm so glad we had such a deep and detailed discussion about weight. I'm glad we talked about chronic illness a bit. And I'm glad we just got really real about this conversation about like fat phobia, a bit about weight stigma, and about how it opposes this truly anti-diet, health at every size, intuitive eating philosophy that we hold so dear because we've seen it transform so many lives for the better, helping people reconnect with themselves in a bigger, more deeper, more impactful way so they can live out their purpose in life. So important. Cherie, everybody is wondering like where they connect with you, where they can connect with you, where they can learn more from you. Can you share with them about your program and about your offerings and where they can find you on social media? That's where we connected anyway.
Yes, of course, for sure. So I am on Instagram. My handle is Food Freedom Therapist. And I also have my website, foodfreedomtherapy.com. I have a, like you mentioned in the intro, I have a group practice. So I've got another therapist and I've got a coach now that I absolutely love. And she's been running a body image program that is going really well. We're very excited about it. And so we're in the middle of that, but we'll probably open enrollment for the next round, pretty soon over the next month or so. And so that'll open back up and lots of other things in the works coming down the pipeline, but that's what we've got going right now. And it's very exciting to just be doing this work. I'm so grateful every day. And like you were saying just earlier, I think before we started recording, just thinking back where we were at when we were in this place, and it almost feels surreal to be where we're at now in this place that we felt was truly impossible when we were in our own food and body image struggles. And so I hope that offers a lot of encouragement and hope for other people when they feel really stuck or they feel like it's impossible, that it truly isn't. But all of us that have recovered have felt that way before, and we were wrong. And sometimes it's a good thing to be wrong.
We were wrong and we had an openness to try something radically different. We did, it worked, and now we're offering it to other people. And through your programs and through your just super kind, yet kindly straightforward and simple approach. I'm just obsessed with your approach. I'm obsessed with you, truly. I'm one of your biggest fans.
Oh, that's so
I'd like to
sweet.
direct everyone over to your Instagram. Again, it's Food Freedom Therapist on Instagram. Go check out her stuff. Wait for her next launch of her body image program. And truly, if you have like this openness to exploring intuitive eating deeper, lean into where that openness is coming from. Start tackling some of your own internalized fat phobia, weight stigma that you might hold. I hold it too. A lot of people do. It's okay to put all of that on the table and explore what intuitive eating might have to offer. I hope that you do. I hope this episode inspired you in some way. And if it did, share it with somebody else that feels like super at war with food in their bodies, somebody that you talked about dieting with recently, somebody where you kind of got vulnerable about talking about food and body stuff. Share this podcast, this episode with them. That might reach them in a certain way that helps connect them with themselves. Thank you so much for doing that. And while you have your phone out, you know what I'm going to say. Hit that subscribe button. Ta-da! Then you will not miss one episode ever at the kitchen table, launching here every Monday and Thursday. I'm excited to see you back here on Monday's episode. I'd like to thank you, Cherie, for being here with me today so much. Thank you. And I will see everybody else on Monday's episode. Have a great day, a great weekend, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, Cherie.
Thank you.